They said I was cold-hearted for leaving, but years later they showed up begging at my door. I'm Jade, I'm 27 now, but what really shaped me started a long time ago. Growing up, I lived in a house that always felt just a little too cold, even when the thermostat said otherwise. My parents were the kind of people who loved hosting dinner parties, made sure we had picture-perfect Christmas cards every year, and acted like everything was just peachy to the outside world. But behind closed doors, there was one thing that always stood out. My little sister Grace was the star. Grace is 4 years younger than me. From the day she was born, she could do no wrong. She could spill grape juice on the carpet, break dishes, flunk a math test, and still have my parents fawning over her like she'd just cured cancer. Me? I was the smart one, but not in the way you'd think. I was a straight A student from the moment I could hold a pencil. I got a perfect 2,400 on my SAT. I won math and science competitions in high school, even placed nationally in a couple of them. By the time I was 16, I was already building small IT projects, coding apps, designing websites, you name it. My teachers adored me. My guidance counselor once told my parents that I was one of those rare kids who could go to any Ivy League school if I wanted. You'd think my parents would be proud of that. But no. It was more like an inconvenience to them. Something they had to acknowledge occasionally but never celebrate. Grace, on the other hand, wasn't particularly good at anything. I'm not saying that out of jealousy. She wasn't dumb, not at all, just average. She was one of those kids who never really stood out in class, didn't have a strong interest in any hobby, wasn't athletic or artistic. But somehow, my parents acted like she was some kind of fragile prodigy, like she needed to be coddled and encouraged and praised for every little thing. When she got a C in math, it was, she tried so hard, she's doing her best. When I won a robotics competition, they barely looked up from their phones. Literally. I still remember walking into the kitchen one day with this huge gold medal around my neck, grinning like an idiot, and my mom just said, "That's nice, but can you unload the dishwasher?" It got to a point where I stopped telling them about my achievements. I'd quietly go to award ceremonies alone. I didn't even bring up my SAT score at home. My friends knew. My teachers knew. But my parents didn't ask, and I stopped volunteering. What was the point? Every time I did, they'd pivot the conversation to Grace. "You should help your sister more with her homework. Maybe you can tutor Grace in science, she's not wired like you." That kind of thing. And the irony? I did help her. I helped her with everything. Homework, projects, writing her college applications. She got into a decent state school thanks in part to the essay I basically wrote for her. And the whole time, our parents just acted like Grace was this amazing, self-made success. Like she had overcome so much adversity to get where she was. While I, Miss 4.0 GPA, Miss Build Your Own App at 17, was just expected to keep succeeding quietly in the background. No parties, no cake, no congratulations. They said I didn't need encouragement because I was already so self-sufficient. Like success came easy for me, so they had to pour their energy into Grace. I can't count the number of times I heard my dad say, "Grace needs us more, Jade will be fine." As if being talented meant I didn't need love, support, or even basic recognition. I remember once in high school, I came home with a full scholarship offer from a prestigious summer tech camp, something only a handful of students in the entire country got. I was ecstatic. I thought, just maybe, they'd see it differently this time. My mom didn't even look at the letter. She just said, "That's nice, but who's going to drive Grace to cheer practice if you're gone all summer?" That was the moment it really sank in for me. Nothing I did would ever matter to them as much as Grace did, and not because she was special, but because she needed them to believe she was. So yeah, I spent most of my childhood feeling invisible in my own home. Not unloved exactly, but unchosen. And when your own family makes you feel like an afterthought, that leaves a mark. So, when I turned 18, everything started to shift, even if I didn't realize it right away. That summer, I got accepted into a pre-college summer program at Stanford. It was one of those intensive academic camps designed for high school seniors and incoming college freshmen. The acceptance rate was crazy low, and they only took the top scorers in STEM field. I was thrilled, and for the first time I actually let myself feel excited. Not the fake polite smile I had perfected for the benefit of my parents, but genuine, stomach-flipping excitement. Of course, when I told my parents, they barely reacted. My mom's exact words were, "Well, I hope you're not expecting us to help you pack. We've got enough to do with Grace's dance recital coming up." My dad just nodded and muttered something about travel expenses. But I didn't let that ruin it for me. I packed my own suitcase, bought my own bus ticket with savings from tutoring, and boarded the plane to California alone. No one came to the airport with me. The moment I stepped onto that campus, something inside me shifted. I was surrounded by people who saw me. Not as the other daughter or Grace's older sister, but as Jade. Professors talked to me like my ideas mattered. The other students didn't roll their eyes when I got excited about coding or math theory or artificial intelligence models. They leaned in. They asked questions. They pushed back and debated and challenged me in ways I had never experienced before. And instead of being dismissed or ignored, I felt like I belonged. I remember one night in particular. We were sitting in the common area after hours, just a group of us nerds, laptops open, bouncing ideas back and forth. I had this concept for a real-time accessibility app for the visually impaired that I had been tinkering with for a while. When I shared it, instead of brushing it off, people were excited. They offered suggestions, resources, even offered to help me develop it further. That was the night I realized I'd spent my whole life waiting for approval from people who never wanted to understand me, when there was an entire world of people who already did. By the end of that summer, I felt like I was finally breathing clean air for the first time. It was like I had been underwater my whole life and didn't even realize it until I surfaced. But then I came home. The second I walked through the front door, that feeling vanished. My mom barely looked up from her phone. Grace was sprawled out on the couch watching TV. My dad asked if I brought back any souvenirs, like I had gone on a beach vacation instead of busting my ass in a university-level research program. And just like that, the toxic fog settled in again. That's when it hit me. I had changed. The house hadn't. The air was still thick with quiet judgment, passive aggression, and that constant undercurrent of, "You're not the one we care about." I noticed things I hadn't before. How Grace could barely make it through a conversation without fishing for attention. How my mom constantly criticized my tone, my clothes, my silence. How my dad only asked me questions about Grace, never about me. I had spent so many years normalizing that environment that I didn't recognize how unhealthy it was until I'd gotten away from it. But now I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't pretend it was just how families were. Stanford had shown me what support looked like, what it felt like to be encouraged, to be seen. And now that I'd tasted it, I couldn't go back to pretending I was okay with being invisible. That realization didn't come with fireworks or some dramatic confrontation. It came in moments, in the way I flinched when someone raised their voice, in how exhausted I felt just being in that house again, in the pit in my stomach every time Grace got praised for mediocrity and I got ignored for excellence. I didn't scream or cry. I just got quiet, focused. I started making plans. So, after that summer at Stanford, everything felt different. I saw my family for what they were, and for a while, I managed to keep my head down. I was still technically living at home while wrapping up school and finalizing some applications, but I was already planning my way out. I had my savings, a couple of freelance IT gigs that brought in decent side income, and I knew the clock was ticking. Then it happened. Grace, for the third time, failed her final geometry exam. She was 17 at the time and had never been particularly strong in math. But this wasn't about skill. This was about effort, or the lack of it. She had every resource: tutors, study materials, even a school counselor who gave her multiple deadline extensions. But still, she failed. Again. I remember the exact moment it all blew up. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I heard my mom's voice from the living room. It had that sharp, clipped tone she used when she was gearing up to blame someone. I stepped in and saw Grace sitting on the couch, sulking, arms crossed, and my dad standing near the fireplace, silent, the way he always was when he was about to back my mom up no matter what. "Jade," my mom said without even looking at me. "How could you let this happen?" I blinked, completely caught off guard. "Let what happen?" "Your sister failed geometry," she said, like it was a national crisis. "Again. And you knew she was struggling. You're so good at this stuff, you couldn't take the time to help her." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious. "I offered to help her 3 times, I said, keeping my voice even. "She said she didn't need it. You were there." "She's under a lot of stress," my dad chimed in. "She needed more support, not attitude. And she's not wired like you," my mom added. "You just get this stuff. It's easy for you. But Grace has to work twice as hard. You could have stepped in more." That was it. That was the last straw. All the years of being overlooked, dismissed, blamed, and used as a fallback finally caught up to me. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stood there for a moment, took a deep breath, and said, "Okay." I walked upstairs to my room, closed the door, and started packing. Not frantically. Methodically. I already had a backpack ready with my laptop, external drives, charger, a few clothes, and documents. I grabbed my suitcase from under the bed and filled it with the essentials. My notebooks, the few personal items that actually mattered to me, and the $14,700 I had saved in cash from freelance jobs, tutoring, and prize money from competitions over the years. I kept it hidden in an old box labeled camp gear, because I never trusted my family not to dig through my things. By the time I zipped up the suitcase, it was almost silent in the house. They must have thought I was sulking. Or maybe they didn't think about me at all. I walked downstairs, suitcase in one hand, backpack over my shoulder. Grace was on her phone. My mom was in the kitchen pretending to ignore me. My dad was still by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking smug like he'd won something. "I'm leaving," I said. My mom looked up, startled. "What?" "I'm leaving," I repeated calmly. "I'm not coming back." "Don't be dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "I'm not," I said, already opening the front door. "I've got money. I've got plans. And I'm done." And I meant it. So, after I walked out of that house for the last time, I didn't hesitate. I went straight to the bus station, bought a one-way ticket with cash, and rode 200 kilometers to a city I'd scoped out months earlier when I first started thinking about leaving. It wasn't a huge place, but big enough to offer new opportunities and small enough that I wouldn't be swallowed up by it. I didn't have a place lined up yet, but I had a plan. That night, I checked into a hotel using only cash. It was nothing fancy, just one of those mid-tier places near a highway exit, but it was clean, quiet, and safe. That was all I needed. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the sound of the air conditioner humming steadily in the background. My bag sat beside the door, zipped up tight, like even it wasn't sure this was real. I kept replaying everything that had happened earlier. The accusations. The calm way I walked away. The silence when I left. I kept expecting to feel guilt or regret or fear, but none of that came. What I felt was relief. Pure, full-body relief. The next morning, I woke up early, took a long shower, and booted up my laptop. I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi and pulled up my email. There it was. An internship offer I had received a week earlier from a mid-sized tech company based in the city I had just arrived in. I had done a remote interview with them back when I was still at home, though I never told anyone about it. The position wasn't just some coffee-fetching internship. It was part of their innovation and product development team. The offer included a full-time schedule, benefits, and a starting salary of $138,000 per year. I clicked accept without hesitation. Within a few hours, I had the onboarding documents in my inbox, along with a start date, a welcome packet, and instructions to come in the following Monday to meet my supervisor and go through orientation. It all felt so surreal. Just 24 hours earlier, I was being blamed for Grace's failures and treated like my success was some kind of nuisance. Now I was in a new city, in a hotel room I paid for with my own money, starting a job that would pay me more than both of my parents combined. It was the first day of my new life. After accepting the internship, I started settling into the city the best way I could. The salary sounded great on paper, but that first paycheck was still weeks away, and I had to be smart with the cash I brought. I reached out to a girl I had met at Stanford during that summer program. She was one of the few people who really got me. Her name was Maya, and when I told her I had just left home and needed a place to crash, she didn't hesitate. She offered me a spot at her place. Well, not exactly a room, more like a closet with just enough space to squeeze in a mattress and stack a couple of boxes against the wall. But it was warm, dry, and came with Wi-Fi, and that was all I needed. I paid her $700 a month in cash, grateful for the roof over my head and the chance to breathe without walking on eggshells. During that time, I worked like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. I put in 15-hour days as a freelancer, taking on every gig I could find, coding, pen testing, debugging security protocols for small startups, and anything else that paid. I was living on $3 soups from the corner market, working on a used laptop, sleeping on a thin mattress in a converted storage space, but I was happy. For the first time in my life, the pressure I felt was mine. It wasn't coming from parents who wanted me to carry my sister or from teachers who expected me to stay quiet about my achievements. It was mine. And it felt different. It felt like purpose. It was around that time I met Vikram. He was speaking at a local tech meetup about cybersecurity threats in small businesses. I went because the event had free pizza, and at the time, free food was not something I passed up. After the talk, there was a Q&A session, and I asked a couple of pointed questions about open-source security frameworks. He seemed intrigued. After the event, we talked for over an hour about encryption methods and zero-trust architecture. I didn't think much of it until he asked to see some of my work. 2 weeks later, He invited me to his office. He was the managing partner at a small venture capital firm and had been looking for someone to lead a new cybersecurity initiative focused on scalable solutions for early-stage tech companies. He offered to invest $600,000 into a company if I was willing to start one. I didn't hesitate. By the time I turned 21, my company had 42 employees and offices in 3 cities. We provided security solutions for everything from fintech platforms to health tech apps, and we were scaling fast. The company had already been valued at $28 million, and we had barely scratched the surface of what we could do. I was living in a real apartment by then, eating real meals that didn't come from a can, still working long hours, but with a team behind me and a vision that was finally mine. So, it had been 6 years. 6 years of absolute, complete silence. Not a text. Not a voicemail. Not a single birthday message or holiday greeting. Nothing. And then, out of nowhere, I woke up one morning, checked my phone, and there it was. 11 missed calls from my mom, 6 from my dad, and 14 from Grace. 14. For a second, I just stared at the screen, thinking maybe it was some kind of glitch. But no. The timestamps were all from the last 24 hours. Voicemails too. I didn't listen to them right away. I just sat there in my apartment, holding my phone, trying to make sense of why after all these years of pretending I didn't exist, they were suddenly blowing up my phone like their lives depended on it. I didn't need to guess for long. Later that day, I got an email from a generic-sounding Gmail address with the subject line, "Please, we need your help." It was from Grace. According to her, the bank was about to take the house. Foreclosure was imminent. My parents had missed too many payments, and their savings were gone. My dad had apparently retired early due to health issues, and my mom's part-time income wasn't enough to cover the mortgage. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Grace couldn't find a job. She had gone to college, barely graduated, bounced from one temporary gig to another, and now, at 23, she was unemployed with over $200,000 in debt. Some of it was from student loans, but most of it, I quickly realized, was from credit cards, personal loans, and what she vaguely called emergency expenses. She didn't say it directly, but the tone was clear. They wanted me to fix it. 6 years after they blamed me for her academic failures, after they threw me out for not babysitting her through geometry, after they cut me out without hesitation, they were suddenly back. And they were desperate. So after I read that email from Grace and saw all the missed calls from my parents, I just sat there for a long time. 6 years of silence. 6 years where they never once tried to check in, ask how I was doing, or even acknowledge that I existed. And now, suddenly, they were all reaching out like I was supposed to just forget everything that happened and jump in to save them. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to think it through, to make sure that whatever I said came from a place of clarity, not emotion. But the truth was, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt anymore. I had done all my grieving a long time ago. What I felt was something colder. Something final. When I finally responded to Grace, I kept it short. I didn't ask how she was doing. I didn't acknowledge her situation. I just wrote, "You said I ruined your lives. So live without me." That was it. No apology would have made a difference. No amount of begging would have undone the way they cut me out. And I wasn't about to offer her a job at my company, either. She had no qualifications, no work ethic, and no concept of accountability. Bringing her in would have meant inviting the same dysfunction back into the life I'd worked so hard to build. They asked for help. I said no. I didn't offer money, didn't suggest solutions, didn't open the door even a crack. I blocked their numbers, marked their emails as spam, and deleted their voicemails without listening to a single one. Not out of spite. Out of peace. I had made it this far without them, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back down now. So after I blocked their numbers, ignored the emails, and shut the door on any possible comeback, I thought that was it. I thought they'd get the message. But of course, I should have known better. A week later, they showed up. Not in my inbox this time. In person. It was a Saturday morning, and I was about to head out for a meeting with one of our new international clients. I was staying at my penthouse in San Francisco, something I bought outright last year after the company hit a major growth milestone. It's one of those high-rise buildings with a private elevator and 24-hour security, so when my concierge called and said, "There are 3 people downstairs asking for you. They say they're your family," I already knew who it was. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked out at the skyline through my floor-to-ceiling windows, then walked over to my closet. I put on my slate gray suit, tailored in Milan, worth $9,000. Clipped in a pair of diamond earrings, $4,800. Nothing flashy, nothing overdone. Just clean, sharp, and impossible to ignore. If they were going to show up uninvited, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing even a flicker of weakness. I took the private elevator down. When the doors opened, I saw them standing there in the lobby. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. My father was staring at the floor. Grace had her arms folded, clearly trying to act like this wasn't humiliating for her. But I saw it in their eyes. They weren't there to make peace. They were there because they thought showing up would change something. Because they thought proximity still meant power. I didn't sit down. I didn't even say hello. I looked them straight in the eye and said, "You didn't want me when I was nobody. You won't get me now that I'm somebody." Silence. They didn't even try to argue. I turned around, walked back to the elevator, and rode it up alone. So, a few months after that day in the lobby, I heard through a mutual contact what ended up happening to them. The house was gone. Foreclosed, auctioned off by the bank, and emptied out within weeks. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place with stained carpets, unreliable plumbing, and neighbors who scream at each other through the walls. My mom tried to keep up appearances but eventually stopped pretending. My dad took a job as a call center operator, working long hours, answering complaint calls from angry customers, and barely making enough to cover rent. Grace, who used to roll her eyes at people who worked retail, ended up as a saleswoman in a strip mall clothing store, folding t-shirts and watching teenagers steal makeup from the shelves. Meanwhile, I sold the company. It took months of negotiation, but in the end, the deal closed for just over $120 million. After taxes and shares to early team members, my cut was more than enough. I bought a house on the coast, white stone, glass walls, endless ocean. I bought another in the mountains, quiet, surrounded by trees, with a fireplace that stays lit through the winter. I work when I want to now. Travel when I feel like it. I spend most of my time building things that matter to me. And they're not part of any of it.